Thanks, right, for showing up to this talk. So I'll give you a very, very quick introduction to who we are for those of you who don't know. I'm Mohammad Ghassemi. I am a recently minted PhD. I just got out of MIT alive, which is nice. And Tuka is shortly on her way to getting out of MIT as well in a couple of months' time. And sort of the history of this is that in our day jobs, Tuka and I were doing work in speech and language processing, and she was doing speech and language processing, I was doing physiological signal processing. And so we met and we thought, oh, well, I wonder if you could sort of glue those two things together, if you could do some interesting things in the social sphere. And that's sort of how we met and got interested in this question of how do you know thyself, right? So we'll talk a little bit about this. I want to ask you guys up front, we have a coding potential session for this, and then we have a more of kind of an interactive, where you're going to interact with other people component to this. Can I just get a show of hands, people who would want to do the coding session? Can you raise a hand?
How intense is the coding?
I'm sorry?
How intense is the coding?
I don't think it's terribly intensive. Okay. I mean, you know, do you guys know Python? How many people in the room know Python? Okay. And then there's how many people would prefer to do the you know, the human kind of interaction session? Just raise your hand. Okay. So
which one do you think is more more fulfilling, like for your workshop purposes?
So I think, to be honest, I think we can share the code with you after the workshop. We can post a version of it on GitHub for you to download, and we're going to demo the code for you anyway. So, you know, I think from that perspective, doing something with other people in the room might be more beneficial to you, but I really will leave it up to your discretion. You're about tied, so, you know, do we want to flip a coin on it? You know, yeah. Does anybody have a coin? How about we do this? If you guys, unless there's a strong feeling otherwise, what we'll do is we'll probably do the human kind of interactive component of it, and then we'll post the code on GitHub and also show you a live demo of sort of some of the things that we do. And then you should know as well, if our email addresses were not already shared with you, I will put them here on the board so that you can contact and email us. And we will respond to you and help you out with any of the projects you guys are doing. So mine is just my last name, which is Ghassemi at mit.edu. And Tuka's is even easier. It's just her first name, Tuka, at mit.edu. So, like, you know, contact us, email us if you have questions. Okay, great. So, let's get started. I thought it's interesting to start with the story behind the phrase. In 1600 BC, there was a temple in Luxor, Egypt. And as is common and what you'd expect from temples, people would go to these temples to worship, to ask the many gods that resided in that temple for various things that they wanted. And so what I find very interesting about this temple in Luxor, though, is that it had two areas. It had an external area, which is what you're seeing in front of you. It's actually still standing in Egypt, where people would go and they would make their offerings and ask the gods for various things that they wanted. And then if you were very, very well initiated, if you had passed certain sort of qualifications and gone through some rigorous screening, and they had collected basically a bunch of data on you, data, but it was just, they're doing it on papyrus, I suppose, and all the checks kind of went through, then you got to access the internal component of the temple, where there was apparently a very well kept and very important secret that only the people who had gone through the screening could collect. And that secret was this: know thyself and you shall know the gods. That was the great secret that they put people through so much work to collect. And so, you know, this concept of knowing yourself, right, as being quintessential to your growth, your success, is an old idea, but I think it's still a very relevant one. I think it's also important for us to point out that even if you don't know yourself, there's plenty of people that want to know you, right? And they want to know you very intimately. So companies such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, etc., there's all sorts of information that they collect systematically on all of us in this room. So they collect, if you're on Gmail, for example, they'll have your contacts. Facebook has your friends. Data gets shared across these institutions. if you use any kind of search, which you're not paying for, which I think that's all of us, they have your search history, things that you've liked or spent time on, purchases, when, how much, and where you'd like to go if you leave on your phone, you're generous enough to leave your GPS on for them to look at, and then of course your communication streams. That's anything that's in the body of your emails, your tweets, your texts, the Facebook Messenger. In fact, the coding example that we will be posting online for you and that we will demo here today is digesting the contents of your email body, just pulling out so that you could kind of see with your own eyes what Google could ascertain from you just from your Gmail, and what you could even ascertain potentially about yourself from your own Gmail. Okay, so why do they go about collecting this, right? Well, it's not because they want to initiate you into the temple like the old days. Now, they want to figure out certain more important things that they care about, like, well, who of these people that you know are your family members? Who are people that you care about and respect? And who are people that are your enemies? And then this one, as you guys all probably know from the Cambridge Analytica stories, all of you know the Cambridge Analytica nonsense. Yeah, okay, good. So they want to infer from things that you say what your ideology, religion, or political leanings might be as well. That's useful information for them. The GPS is useful for them to know where your home is, which is ridiculously easy to figure out. They just look at night and they say, where is the GPS sort of parked? And that's your home. If they want to figure out where you work, they just say, where is the GPS parked in normal working hours? And that's where you work. And then, you know, it's very easy to triangulate if you're in a location for 2 hours and it happens to, on Yelp, be a restaurant, they know what your favorite restaurant is. So, figuring out whether you're angry, tired, they can get this from your email records. And then, most importantly of all, what you desire, right? And this, you know, popularity, a better career, a car, being less lonely, this is consequential because of this. There's three things that they want to, they've gone through all this madness to just basically do three things. The first is to profit on the data that they have, so to directly sell it. Actually, the cost of any of your data is about $40 per head per year. That's how much they charge, roughly, if they just want to sell the data. If they want to sell the ads, affiliated with that, the prices could fluctuate depending on how valuable of a target they think you are. So if you're in an emotionally vulnerable state, for instance, and you're more likely to buy, Facebook will actually charge more for the ad to post to anybody in the room, because you're more emotionally vulnerable right now, so there's a higher chance you might buy something. Power is the ability to change your mind on something, right? So if I know what you think about things, if I know your ideological background, who your family members are, where you live and where you work, I could tell you a very different story when I'm trying to argue something than if you're just a random person. It's like if I was giving this talk to each of you one-on-one, and I knew all of the information that I put up on the previous slide, I could tailor-make it to each of you so that you found it particularly profound, this talk, right? So that's what I mean by power. It's the ability to convince people of things that, you know, they would not have believed otherwise, and it's different from profit. This is the Cambridge Analytica nonsense that we had, or that everybody's sort of making a big fuss over in the election. The reality is that even though they're making a fuss over it, this has been happening for years, right? I mean, so this isn't, you know, a new thing. And the third, and this one is sometimes actually overlooked, is prestige, actually. Having access to all this data on everybody in this room, so that, how many people are in this room? Maybe, you know, 20 or something? Okay, so it's, you know, what, $800 a year worth of data just sitting in this room that they pay just for the raw data. But beyond just the financial value of the data, a lot of smart people are very interested in what we're all doing. Like there's a nosiness, a busybodiness that sort of lives within all of us, certainly within me, I would say. And, you know, because Google has this very interesting data on what everybody's looking at all the time, they're able to attract really smart people to come in and work for a bargain for them. So Jan LeCun is one of the guys who invented the deep neural network, for those of you who are familiar with deep neural networks. Geoffrey Hinton is another one of the people who invented deep neural networks. They both have prominent research, leading research positions at companies like Facebook and Google, and then of course there's Andrew Ng from Stanford who went and worked with Baidu, the Chinese equivalent of Google in Asia. Okay, so these are the three reasons that people are so interested in the information that you provide. So it's not really that companies want to know you, it's that companies actually do know you. They know you very well. And in some ways, they actually know you better than your friends or family do. Because when I'm at least speaking, I'll use myself as an example, when I go to Thanksgiving dinner, I don't volunteer all the details about my life to the family members sitting on the table. I feel that it might be consequential to reveal certain facts to those family members, as I'm sure many of you also do. But I am guilty of this, of confessing a very personal thought to Google. And in fact, a lot of people end up doing this. They will write things like, am I short? Am I fat? Things that Google actually cannot possibly answer, but they are confessed nonetheless. Very much like going to the church and speaking to the guy behind the veil. And actually there's a book for those of you who are interested in this particular phenomenon that recently came out called Everybody Lies. And in this book, the author talks about what you can learn about people's A, search history on Google, and B, search history on Pornhub. The kinds of very interesting things you can learn about people and the things they will confess to search engines that are quite dark aspects of our personalities. Okay, so the reason that this is pertinent for you to know is because Google knows who you are when you make those queries, right? So it's an interesting thing that in some ways they might know you better than some of your friends and family members do, at least along some axes. Now the really important one is this though. I would argue that they know you even better in some respects than you know yourself. And that's because I don't actually know which restaurant in Cambridge I frequent most often. But if they have access to GPS, they know that. And I don't even know which restaurant I frequent the most. I don't know how often I cut people off in conversations, or how abrasive or aggressive I might be when I'm writing my emails, how the other parties perceive me when they write about me to their colleagues. I don't know if I'm funny, a leader, a supportive friend. I might tell myself a story that makes me feel good, but I actually don't know what those qualities are. Okay? Those are qualities that you have to infer from looking at many people's interactions with you from a higher view. So this is really the kicker, right? And what I hope to convince you is that we can learn to know ourselves, that the old way that they wanted to do in those temples so long ago, right? By using the data that we're already sharing with the companies anyway, right? You can take that data and you can study yourself, and you can hopefully improve yourself. This is one component of it. I think the second component of it, which is the interactive exercise that I wanted to speak about, was to have people in your network actually share data they've collected with you, and that's in the form of honest feedback. To just give you, like straight to your face, honest feedback about what you're good at and what you're not good at, how you're perceived, how you're not perceived, things like that. Because that information is being collected anyway. You can close your eyes and plug your ears to it, but it's there anyway. Okay. So with that, I'm going to now introduce the two things that we will be talking about that have a technical nature to the talk. And that is first an artificial intelligence algorithm that we came up with last year that tries to evaluate how well a conversation is going between two people in real time. And that uses data streams from the audio on their phone, you just turn the mic on, as well as the a wearable wristwatch. Now the reason we thought this is data that would already be collected is because if any of you have Facebook Messenger on your phone and you read the terms and conditions, they can turn on the mic at any time anyway. So, right, and we learned in one of the recent reports that they are monitoring phone records. So, it's data that's actually, in many senses, already being collected. The second thing that we'll talk about is a tool that's going to report your behavior online in the context of email interactions so that you can see a network, and we'll demo that live for you. And we'll try to show you how you can build upon some of the things we've done for those of you who are interested. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tuka, who's going to give the first component of the talk.
Okay, so the scene I'd like to paint is, any kind of outing you're out with friends or family, you're at lunch or a dinner or even out with colleagues, and no one wants to look bad. You want to have very good interactions with people, and sometimes the interaction goes great, other times it flops. But the tricky thing is that when you try to rewind what happened, it's very difficult to pinpoint what was that, key thing that you did. Was it a joke? Was it the way you were pacing the interaction with the person that made the interaction turn out to be great or not so great? So it'd be really neat if you could have a social coach or a personal assistant, digital assistant that could give you some historical overview of what's happening, or even in real time give you some evaluation of how that interaction is going. So the grand vision is to have a social coach that is personal to you, that is figuring out how that interaction is going. And so as a step towards that larger vision, we said, okay, let's try to see if we can actually quantify these interactions and set up an experiment, collect different kinds of data to try to figure out what's happening in interaction. And actually the first reason we did this is because we were at a philosophy club, talked to friends, and they're like, no, you can't quantify, humans are complex and their interactions and stuff like that. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, humans are complex, but we could, why not? Why not try to figure out a scenario or a setup where we can actually figure out what's happening in the interaction at some level? And so what we thought is, okay, let's do a simple setup where we try to figure out whether an individual is happy or sad, and we prompt them to narrate a happy or sad story. Very open-ended, they could go on storytelling or having that conversation for as long as they wanted, and it was really up to them what kind of story they thought was happy or they thought was sad. So we had all kinds of different stories. Someone lost their luggage, that was their sad story. Happy story, someone found a flower in their garden.